Hi everyone, nice to be here. So I was on the phone the other day to a CPO of a Global 500, a brand name. And the conversation went a bit like this, and I'm sure this will resonate. Sally, I need a marketing category manager. They need to have definitely between 5 and 7 years experience, ideally financial services background, but I just really need them to replace X. Okay, fine. So as the conversation went on, I then posed the question, so given that there is a real shortage of top talent in procurement at the moment, for the right talent, how are you going to sell this opportunity? And the response? We're a Global 500. We're a brand name. Kind of what more do you need? Okay, fine. And then we moved on. And we got round to talking about the interview process. And so the response was, first stage, HR will do that. And then second stage, I'll bring in one of my hiring managers to do a technical competency-based interview. And then if that goes well, I'll bring in a couple of the stakeholders to make sure that this person fits the mould. Great. So our clients include some of the biggest brands in the world. And this is a conversation that my guys are having day in, day out. So I really wanted to break this down. So firstly, let's talk about defining the role. And companies that take a step back and really define their roles hire better. And of course, I do appreciate there is a natural temptation to plug and play. I do understand that you want to maintain business as usual. But however, I would urge you to take a step back and challenge preconceptions. And I think we've touched on this in a number of the other presentations. So I would urge you to ask questions of yourself like, have you considered the cultural balance of your team? And we all know that companies with a diverse mix of people within the team are more effective. It's proven. So are you unconsciously recruiting in your own image? Or have you put aside those preconceptions and genuinely analysed the skills you need and interviewed objectively? So decisions are still made on CVs which talk about someone's background rather than behaviours, I would argue. So also, does this person have to fit to the traditional 9 to 5? So I'm going to give you an example. We are currently recruiting for a role with a private equity company. And it's had the biggest response we've had in a long time, quality response of candidates. And you're all going to shake your heads and you're going to go, that's because it's with private equity. Yeah? It's not. When you actually look at the motivations of the candidates who are applying, it's because on there, the role clearly outlines that there is a flexible working pattern, and that is what has appealed to them. So do consider whether you are really tied to that 9 to 5. And are you willing to make brave decisions as well around skill sets? Can someone tick some of the boxes, but not all of them, to potentially move you away from being constrained into that typical skill set? So competition for the right talent, especially in procurement, is incredibly fierce. And therefore recruitment really needs to, I feel, explore all pools of talent that are available. And we need to change our formulaic approach. We have and we all do, we have an unconscious bias to keep hiring in the mould. And from the criteria that we've done previously, it's, Sally, you should have the job spec. We used it a couple of years ago. Use that. And I don't think necessarily we're considering other pools of talent that could make a contribution positively to the team. So to summarise about defining the role, I'm going to give you an example of a retail client of mine who's done this really well. And I'm going to push the boundaries a little bit here. So they went to market and they wanted to recruit for a fairly junior indirects role. However, what they actually looked at is that They started from the point of defining basic core behaviours like commerciality and authenticity. And they also considered that transferable skills were things like contract negotiation. So contract negotiation in any form was contract negotiation to them, whether it be for widgets or whether it be for a software system. Now, they ended up hiring someone with no indirects. He'd only done directs. And this guy's been in place for 18 months now. He's outperforming people who have been there considerably longer. He's had 2 promotions, and he recently won an industry award. So it's just something to start you thinking outside of the traditional mould. Secondly, I'm going to talk about shop window. And by this, I mean, what does the candidate see and hear? So companies that sell themselves, come back to the social media piece, actually do hire better people. And of course, there is the temptation, like my anecdote at the beginning, that if you are a household brand, people will know what you do. And of course they do. They know what you do. But do they actually know why it is great to work for you? And I would argue that they don't unless you sell. The point that you're potentially missing is that that amazing candidate who you think is utterly bought into your brand also has 3 other opportunities with household brands going at the same time. And if you're not selling, one of those other brands will sell better than you and swoop in and grab that candidate. And that candidate will no longer be yours, they'll be theirs and working for your competition. So craft your sell. Think about how you're going to articulate the opportunity within your team. And are you practiced in pitching your organisation? So guys, it's a bit like the RFP, but it's in reverse because you're doing it and you're doing the pitching to the candidate. If the candidate was to ask 5 different people in your organisation that they met throughout the process why they liked working for the organisation, could you be absolutely sure that you'd know the answers? Because you need to be. And have you sat down with your team and asked them why they like working for you? And what motivates them to get up in the morning every day and to continue working? And have you then built that into your own proposition back to the candidate? Because it's really powerful. Also, just have a think outside the box. Think about what motivates different groups of people. So a sell to, say, a 50-year-old is not necessarily going to be the same sell that appeals to a 25-year-old. And again, I wanted to give you an example. So to summarise an absolutely fantastic shop window, we work with a large infrastructure business who, in order to be able to articulate why working there is so fantastic, they have undertaken a persona analysis. And by that, what they've done is they've invited various employees by job groups to a roundtable discussion. So, for example, those people that work in IT, procurement, finance, engineering. And they've asked them all the same questions. They've asked them what motivates them, why they have stayed with the business, and anything that's changed over the period that they've worked there. They've found, for example, that engineers are really concerned with legacy. So their sell now encompasses the piece that, do you want to work for someone where you can say, look at what I built? And these strap lines and discussions and key points have then been turned into family-specific role profiles, shareable copy, and form a key piece of their unique shop window on LinkedIn. The next one is interview experience, and interestingly, Steve and I were talking about this earlier. Every touch point throughout the interview experience needs to be exceptional, and it needs to move with pace. Also, candidates can't believe what they can't see. If your company is championing diversity, then ensure that that candidate meets a diverse group of people throughout their interview process. Sounds basic, doesn't it? But it doesn't always happen. Have you taken the step back? You may have worked where you've worked for a while, have taken a step back and put yourself into the shoes of the candidate throughout the interview process, because it's a good thing to do. Firstly, and this is a blatant plug, select an agency with whom you trust and with whom you feel you can craft that sell. There is a situation whereby perhaps when you're we find when you're using more than one agency, that message to the market becomes somewhat blurred. And it does result in very mixed messages to the candidates. So the most effective recruitment is often done by a single agency who really knows you and your business inside out. How quickly does your process move? And I really want you to be really honest about this from a candidate point of view. How quickly do you think your process moves? And I get people have concerns with meeting rooms. I get it, but you really need to think about this. There's nothing more off-putting to a candidate who has become emotionally invested in your organisation to then wait 2 or 3 weeks for the next step or for the feedback. And I can't tell you the amount of times in the conversations we've had with candidates, and we have to try and really reassure them. The conversation goes along the lines of, if they've spent this amount of time to make what should be a very simple recruitment decision, is that indicative of how their business moves? Is that the pace at which procurement move at? If you want the best people, you have to move at pace. Otherwise, they'll fall out of the process. So I know it's not news, but all candidates do want to work for fast-moving, agile companies, and your interview process reflects it. Something I spoke about with Helen is that, are your interview questions fit for purpose, or are you relying on the same old that you've been using for 10 years plus? So many times, and I'm just going to give you a snapshot, graduates are asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? They don't care, genuinely. And why should they? Why should they? Don't ask it. The quality of your interview questions really determines the quality of your engagement with your candidates and a more accurate screening process. Take that step back again, look at those interview questions and find more appropriate questions which will result in better hiring. You must think about what the candidate goes through, from the initial call to your recruiter, to how they're greeted by your receptionist, to that sales pitch from you and your team, and then through to the offer process with HR. It has to be exceptional, and it has to move at pace to get the right talent. Those companies that provide that exceptional interview process hire better people. So again, I'm going to give you a very personal summary of a great candidate experience. So I work with a food company. And as you go into their building, the very smiley receptionist says, "Hi," and passes you a pack of their very famous biscuits. And they also get a token for a cup of tea in the restaurant. So you can dunk your biscuit while you wait for your hiring manager to come and get you. And probably too much information, guys, but when you go into their toilets, on the back of the door, there is a poster defining their approach to the health and well-being of their people and outlining their Positive Minds initiative. Now, that's a really pretty strong and positive message about the people and culture of that company. So I'd really like to leave you with 3 thoughts. Define your role. Challenge any preconceptions you or your hiring managers may have. And please be brave. We've talked about it a lot today, and it relates to recruitment as much as it does to procurement. Be brave and step outside of the norm. Set out your shop window think about the role and what makes the company great, but even more so, what is great about working for you, and be able to articulate that. And then very finally, ensure your interview experience is slick and sexy. Thank you for listening to me. I hope that one or two things have resonated, and I hope you hear my voice in your head next time you choose to recruit. I'm here all day. I'm here for networking in the evening, so please grab me and have a chat. Thanks.